Okay, so today I'm going to be beginning my 2023 completed SAS list series. So I don't know how often I'm going to do these, but what my goal will be to create a playlist where I include all of the completed series on my SAS list for the year, and there should be at least 15 by the time we're done. But today we are starting with the first completed series on my SAS list, which is the Personal Demons series by Lisa DesRoches. Now, unlike the other series that I completed this year, with this particular series called the Personal Demons trilogy/series, this series has taken me 3 years to get through. So, let's talk about each individual book and their stats, and then I will go into discussing a bit more about each individual book. So, the first book in the series is this book, Personal Demons. It is a YA fantasy, and I gave this book 3 stars. I read this book, I finished this book on February 3rd of 2020. The second book in the series is this book, Original Sin, which is also obviously a YA fantasy, and I gave this book 4 stars, and I finished this book in October of 2021. And the third book in the series is this book, Last Rite, which is also obviously a YA fantasy. I gave this book 5 stars, and I finished this book in January of 2023. Okay, so let's discuss my thoughts. So, book 1, Personal Demons, starts our journey. We are following the perspective of, I think, 2. Yeah, we're following, it's a dual perspective. We follow the perspective of Franny, Kavanagh, and Luke. Luke Kane, apparently, is his surname, but his surname really doesn't come up a lot in the book. But, so Franny and Luke, and there is another character in this book who is Gabe, but we do not follow the perspective of Gabe at all in book 1, which disappointed me, and I'll explain why. The premise of this book, and therefore the premise of the series, is that Franny is a mortal girl, or at least she believes she is, who is going through a tough time. Her brother died and they were very close, so she is just struggling to live day to day. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to her, both heaven and hell have been tipped off by the fates that there is going to be a massive war that is going to take place between both upper and lower parties, I guess is one way to put it. So they then both find out that the most integral key to winning all of this, I'm laughing because I'm remembering, I think, is it South Park? There's an episode of South Park where they tell Butters that Butters is the key, and you go, why do I have to be the key? I don't want to be the key. Can't someone else be the key?
I'm the key. Could I not be the key, Morpheus? I don't want to be the key.
But anyway, Franny is going to be the key to win this big war. So, Hell sends up a representative. Lucifer sends up a representative named Luke, which is short for Lucifer. That's not a spoiler, but he just prefers to be called Luke. Luke is to play the role of a high school boy who has been enrolled at Franny's high school, and he has charmed his way, because Luke, obviously, coming from hell, he has magical abilities. He is the son of Lucifer. He charms his way into her classes and into her life in order to try and tag her for Team Hell. Meanwhile, Heaven sends down Gabriel, to try and tag her for Heaven. So this dual perspective follows Franny and Luke. We don't get Gabe's perspective in book 1, which did annoy me. In saying that, I really didn't enjoy Franny's perspective a whole lot, but I loved Luke's perspective. So I love this whole idea of looking through the eyes of a fantasy creator as to what their idea of heaven and hell is, and exploring it in the deepest possible way, to the biggest degree that they possibly can. And Personal Demons definitely celebrates that with hell. So we get to see Luke in hell, we get to see what hell looks like, we get to learn about the goings on that occur in hell, as well as Luke's powers. But with Gabe, because we don't have Gabe's perspective, we don't get to see heaven, we don't really know what's going on with heaven, we don't know what Gabe's powers or abilities are. Okay, so yeah, so this is the first book that I picked up in my booktube career way back, as I said, in late January. It's not the first book I finished, but it is the first book I picked up. And at the time, I wasn't as well read as I am now. I think upon reread, it might still receive 3 stars from me. I honestly don't know. But what I said at the time was it took a while to get going, but once we got there, it was well worth the wait. And then I said that the climax was well done, the final twist was brilliant, some may predict it, but I didn't. Lisa DesRoches is a good writer, and the book is easy to read if you have read more complicated writing styles and tomes before. I honestly thought I'd be rating this book 1 out of 5 stars once I was halfway through, but the second half was really well done, and I'm so happy I stuck this book out. I was reading it for a buddy read and wanted to keep that commitment, otherwise I would have DNF'd it halfway through. Yeah, so there you go. I felt that this didn't, even though, despite the fact that it was a YA fantasy, I felt that it did not contain a lot of fantastical elements, whilst I am highlighting the hell portion of book number 1, and I absolutely did love that. The fantasy elements took a long time to occur and were few and far between. A lot of the first half of the book was just mortal stuff that was going on. We do learn a couple of things here and there, but for the majority of the time, it's just mortal stuff. And then the second half of the book picked up a lot more. So anyway, ultimately got 3 stars for this one. And now I'm going to talk about book 2, and I don't know how to do this without spoiling anything, so here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to try and keep this as spoiler-free as I can, but proceed forward with caution if you plan to pick up this series. If you don't plan to pick it up or you've already read it, on we go. But if you do plan to read it, I'll try and keep it spoiler-free, but proceed with caution. Okay, so we then move into book number 2, and I think book number 2 either has everyone or just has... Okay, I'm just having a look here just to confirm. Okay, so book number 2 is a multi-perspective, but again, we don't have Gabe's perspective in book number 2, and so that annoyed me once again. We get a third perspective that I can't say who it is because it will be a spoiler, so let's just keep it spoiler-free. So, the only way to really keep this spoiler-free is to talk about my thoughts and feelings. You know what? This is my video. I want to talk spoilers. Okay, put a spoiler tag up on the screen for the majority of the rest of this video, and then when we get to the end, I'll have the spoiler tag taken off the screen, and then I'll give you spoiler-free thoughts to wrap everything up. Alright, so when we get to the end of Personal Demons, Franny knows what's going on, and she knows that Luke and Gabe both plan to tag her, but there's this big bad that comes at the end of the book, and Luke starts to realize that he has fallen in love with Franny and that he feels bad for wanting to tag her for hell. He and Gabe have a discussion, and they both realize that her best bet would be to be tagged for heaven, and so Luke decides to betray his father and try and keep Franny as safe as he possibly can. So we enter into book number 2, and in book number 2 we realize that Matt, which is Franny's brother, is dead, but she can see him as a ghost, and he will appear here and there trying to help Luke and Gabe and assist Franny as well. So there you go. The first half of this book was a slow start, and I was starting to realize that, that's the case with both book 1 and 2, so I was expecting it as well for book 3. But once we got to the halfway mark, it was on, and it was full-on action, and I really appreciated it. It was a full-on packed second half, and I was really, really happy with that. So there's not a lot else that I said about this book, and I'm trying to recall. Luke is really struggling between it almost reminds me of Cole in Charmed. He's struggling with his demonic side versus his human side, because Luke is like half human in a way. So he is tempted by wanting to be in a relationship with Franny, but at the same time he knows his demon side knows that he has a job to do for Lucifer, and it's very much middle book syndrome. The main shining moment of book number 2 is Matt, the fact that Matt comes back as a ghost, and Franny gets to have conversations with Matt, thinking she'd obviously never seen him again, and then Matt is able to assist her in certain things and has certain abilities that Luke and Gabe don't have because he is a ghost. So yeah, not really too much I can say about book number 2, but I'll move on to book 3. So in book number 3, the final battle is finally approaching. So yeah, book number 2 is definitely a middle book syndrome for me, because I thought that that we would get close to the final battle, or it would start or something, and that did not occur. And I felt like in book number 2, we were literally just trying to run away from what was going on. We were trying to ignore the fact that this battle was going to happen, and that annoyed me. But in book number 3, I expected a slow beginning, because I had that for the first half of books 1 and 2. But nay, sir, that did not happen. Book number 3 was action-packed all the way through. So the premise of book number 3 is that the final battle is approaching. Though she hasn't had long to prepare, Franny had better be ready for the ultimate battle between heaven and hell. But when she's given an opportunity to change her mind and fight for the other side, which path will she take? Who will win the ultimate battle, and what, pray tell, will become of Gabe and Luke? All these questions and many more answered in the thrilling conclusion. Yeah, so I was really intrigued. She was given that opportunity to decide if she wants to flip everything and fight for hell after all, rather than fight for heaven. And yeah, I found her having to make a decision really interesting. She ultimately ends up fighting for heaven, because why wouldn't she? In a book like this, it would just be weird if she ended up fighting for hell if this was the final book in the series. The final book tied up loose ends, which I really did appreciate, and ultimately Franny ends up finding out that a family member of hers is God, and so that was really interesting. Did not expect that. So it was a massive final twist at the end, and then Franny is told something that I won't give away, that she has to determine what she's going to do with that thing. And yeah, the battle is fantastic. Like, if the first half of books 1 and 2 were a slog for me to get through, it was worth getting through it, because book number 3 was amazing. And I ended up giving book number 3 5 stars. It deserved every single star that it did receive. I think all in all, we can take the spoiler tag off the screen now, because I'm going to wrap this up. I think all in all, if you are someone who wants to read a book about an upcoming battle between heaven and hell, where God sends down an angel, hell sends up a demon to try and tag a mortal, because this mortal is going to determine the fate of a pending war between heaven and hell. If anything in that premise intrigues you, then I would recommend picking up these books. I think overall it was good. I think as an average, I mean, ultimately, what did I end up giving this book? Ultimately, I gave it 12 out of 15. I think so. Yes, 12 out of 15 stars, if we look at the fact that I could potentially give all of them 5. So I ended up giving it 12 out of 15 stars, which is pretty good. So yeah, I'd say it's about a 3.5, 3.89, getting close on a 4-star, all in all. And I do recommend it. I think the world building, particularly in book 1, was fantastic. I think book 2 was a slog, but if you're a character-driven reader, I think you'll appreciate book number 2. And the final battle was absolutely epic and fantastic. So I can't highly recommend that final book enough. And if you want to jump right into book number 3, I almost feel like you can. I mean, I feel like that's cheating the series, but I almost feel like you can jump right into book number 3 if that's what you want to do and read Lust Right. But yeah, I think all in all, it was a good series. It took me 3 years to read, and but that wasn't owing to my lack of interest in the book. I was doing a buddy read with a friend of mine, and my friend takes a lot longer to read because they don't read as much as I do. So I waited a year between reading book 1 and starting book 2 to ask if they wanted to read book 2 with me then, and it ended up being a no, so that was fine. And then ultimately I ended up reading book 2 when I did, and then I eventually got onto book number 3. But that's, take nothing away from the series as a whole. As a whole, the series was fantastic, and yeah, I'm glad that I read it. But anyway, that is my wrap up for my first completed series on my Sasses for 2023, Personal Demons. I'm glad it's done, since it's taken so long for me to get through. And I can now, in the words of Jeff Probst from Survivor, put it to bed and move on to something else. Alright, that is where I am going to leave it for today, letting you all go with peace, blessings, and so much love. Please do be kind and love one another, and spread your sparkling energy all throughout the world. And until next time, happy reading. Bye everyone.